Roughly a year ago, I made a video covering the fantastic Morrowind mod Project Cyrodiil Abyssinian Shores, where players were given the city of Anvil and a DLC-sized area around it to explore. Since enough of you seemed to like that video, I decided to visit the now roughly 6-month-old release for Tamriel Rebuilt, Grasping Fortune, which focuses on some of the southernmost regions of Morrowind's mainland, and features the city of Narsis, one of the largest Morrowind mod cities I've ever seen. In this video, our Abyssinian Shore character, the Nord opportunist turned Admiral of Anvil, Wolf Crowseye, will be returning in hopes his slight level advantage will make exploring the regions of Morrowind more interesting, and allow us to tackle some of the area's harder challenges along the way. To make this slightly more interesting, I've limited Wolf's starting equipment to some fine clothing and a silver saber, knowing full well that by the end of the video he will be positively laden with high-level loot. My only goal going into this run is to complete the Narsis arena, as I'm a sucker for any arena questline. Whatever happens along the way is just gravy. And so, without further ado, I'm Soule Tomato, and this is Grasping Fortune. Our journey begins where our last one left off, in the city of Anvil, where, after a brief visit to the Abyssinian Bazaar for clothing and a weapon, I returned to Goldenrod, our home, to drop off my excess supplies, leaving myself with just the exquisite clothing I just purchased, a few potions, amulets, lockpicks, and about 1,500 gold for the journey. I figured this would be enough for us to get by early on. Getting to Morrowind will be a several days affair, as Anvil is on the complete other side of the continent of Tamriel to us. Speaking to Colton Doralis will allow us to charter a ship to Old Ebonheart on the Morrowind mainland for 384 gold, roughly 1/4 of our current supply, but we won't need to be that concerned. If you've never played Tamriel Rebuilt before, a mod project over 20 years in the making, and one of my favorite ever made, the first area in and of itself will be quite a shock to you, as the large Imperial port hosts dozens of quests, guilds, and secrets to uncover. But we won't be staying. Old Ebonheart released around 2018, and although we won't be exclusively doing quests in the new Grasping Fortune regions for this video, I'd like to get to those areas as soon as possible. Now, initially, I didn't quite grasp how far to the south we would have to go to reach those areas, and so when setting out from the southern gates of Old Ebonheart, I sort of adopted a "I'll just explore things along the way" attitude, as one does when playing a game like this. Places like the nearby tomb of Halawarn, where I quickly discovered that my desire to make this run more difficult had indeed been achieved, as my clothing offering no protection meant I was quickly burning through my already small supply of healing potions. For the sake of this video, I won't narrate every minor dungeon we enter unless I find something inside worth mentioning. That way we don't get bogged down in the small details and stick to the bigger adventure and quests. Eventually I made my way to the town of Vul, where, as I typically do, I went to one of the local inns to ask for rumors and learned about a strange robed man offering travelers some sort of proposition outside town. We will be exploring more of Vul later in another quest, so for now I found the robed man, Vontus, who bet me 25 gold he could beat us in a race. Giving him the gold, the man immediately takes off his clothing and bolts away screaming, running faster than you can believe. You can track this quest to its natural conclusion by asking various farmers nearby if they saw him, but for me I didn't really care enough to find out what happened to him. Instead, I decided to explore some nearby Dwemer ruins, whose basement was filled to the brim with gold ore. Very nice. Leaving, I spotted a village of some sort on the horizon and decided to walk to it, stopping along the way to chat with what appeared to be a pilgrim, but was actually a bandit, who had evidently been robbing pilgrims on the road if they didn't pay her for protection. The buildings we spotted in the distance is the gorgeous port of House Indyril Roa Dir, which mostly serves as the manor of the local Lord Indyril Ilvi. The first noteworthy person we find is a dark elf called Saddam Sedrethi, who is burdened by a heavy conscience. Feeling impious after a life of success and servitude, he feels he has grown lazy and selfish. Wolf suggests he give some of his wealth to charity, and evidently the elf had never considered this and thanks us for easing his mind. Next we spoke to Indyril Ilvi's steward, Duranya, who was seeking an outsider for an investigation into Civet Tong operations in Vul. Duranya believes the organization has ties to House Halalu, who happen to control the region we will be eventually going to, and wants us to root out the truth. I take the opportunity before heading back north to offload what riches I've found so far and to explore the port proper to see its various unique rooms and locales. Returning to Vul, I began asking the local townsfolk about the Civet Tong, with members of the Tong outright boasting of their lack of corruption or snickering that we will never find anything untoward about them. We'll see. I find our first lead from a Redguard merchant named Sodine, who claims that a fellow merchant, Ianasa, who works for the local Punavit brewery, has been walking around with more than her fair share of rations. Visiting the local brewer Dalasi, after a small gold investment, he reveals that he has indeed caught her in the storage room upstairs when she wasn't meant to be. Likewise, he believes she more than likely has a jug or two of Punavit in her home. For clarification, Punavit is for members of House Indyril only and is used for certain rituals. It is not made for standard use or consumption, and so this would be highly illegal if she did happen to have a jug of it. Using an open lock spell on the door, I confirmed Dalasi's suspicions, finding a half-empty jug of Punavit behind Ianasa's bed. That's one piece of evidence gathered, although fairly minor, all things considered. At one of Vul's other inns, the Howling Hound, I come across a Nord complaining loudly about swindling dark elves. This should be good. Hans claims that the local Dark Elves have upcharged him for various goods and wants us to find a way to get the locals to confess to doing so. In the basement of the same inn, I meet an Imperial named Crotabar, who believes Suran, the Tong's accountant, is sending excess revenue to House Hlaalu. As far as the Nord's request goes, most of the local Dark Elves will admit to swindling him for a bribe, such as a bottle of sheen or 50 gold. It's really easy. They're scattered throughout the village. His quest is mostly peripheral to our investigation, but aligns with the suspicion of the town's treachery. While searching for the swindlers, I decided to talk to a local bard named Cyrus, who asks if I would perform in his upcoming piece. Odd. I've never been asked to do something like this before. After reading through the script, I followed along with his words until a vampire appeared, which is odder still. After slaying it, we discovered that Cyrus had evidently been cursed by a Daedra, I think the Daedric prince Sheogorath, but I can't remember, to make his storytelling more interesting, i.e. real, and somehow us killing the vampire has freed him of the curse. All's well that ends well, I suppose. Speaking with Suran, who we now know is the Tong's accountant, and providing a bit of coin-based lubrication to her attitude, she agrees to assist us with our investigation in exchange for immunity and some form of severance pay of 350 gold. A pretty inconsequential sum to rat out your entire organization, but what do I know? Paying her, she tells us of Dallin Valor's journal, a local hunter with a sordid smuggling past. With the journal, we can blackmail him against the Tong. In exchange for it, he will give us a detailed account of Tong activity within the village. Case closed. Returning to Durrania, we complete the quest and eliminate Civic Tong and Hlaalu influence in Vul. She also gives us some gold and pieces of chitin armor, which work for me since we don't currently have any armor otherwise. I was hoping that by helping out the steward, the local lord would wish to speak to me too, but there is no such luck, and so our time in Roadir is at an end. It's time to head further south. Our journey towards the Grasping Fortune region is one filled with minor adventure and exploration, with Daedric ruins of plunder and danger and bandit-infested Dwemer ruins aplenty. At this point, however, I was pretty determined to reach the new areas, and after about 5 hours within the northern regions of Tamriel rebuilt, known as Nothran, we entered the Coronati Basin, or the northernmost point of the Grasping Fortune region. As an aside, the area hosts an impressive amount of tall tree-like mushrooms, which I found pretty neat. There's nothing really to them, I just like the way they look. Our first official stop is Othmura, a Hlaalu settlement on the northern shore of Lake Coronati. In Othmura, we meet Soldrini Alam, a fisherman's wife whose brother-in-law is pressing her husband Celine to smuggle contraband to the Kamana Tong. She asks us to intervene on his behalf. We find Bavis, her brother-in-law, wandering around near the docks of Hlan Oak, and for a few bribes, he agrees to leave Celine alone. We are awarded with the Ring of Mended Meaning for our help, which will allow us to charm someone on touch for 10 to 15 points. Inside Othmura's keep, the Imperial Vibius Verturius is in charge and has a bounty for us involving bandits inside a cave called Kariki, a known den of brigands and other scum. Thanks to Morrowind's not always stellar direction system, it does take me a little longer than I care to admit to find the cave. Inside, I learned the bandits are keeping a troll as a pet, which I decided to free to even the odds, though the troll does prove to be a fair bit more formidable than the bandits. With the bandits and the troll slain, we are awarded 600 gold for eliminating both threats to the region. Bandits in general seem to be a pretty big problem in this part of Morrowind, as I found myself coming across various parties of them in my travels, including one basically within viewing distance of Othmura at an old hut. Eventually, we'll find out that organized crime is probably the culprit for this, and indeed there are several quests involving this in the update. While Wolf himself won't directly participate in those, he will inadvertently bring an end to a pretty major player later on due to an outside request. Our next noteworthy stop is the Hlaalu and Imperial town of Hlern Hol, where I, a member of the Cyrodiil Fighters Guild, decided I should probably join the Morrowind chapter as well since they're separate, though this does mean that our rank will begin at Associate all over again, or rank 1. I speak to the Redguard Quarter to join, and he gives us our first assignment. Our objective is to collect taxes from an elf, some 400 gold. Thanks to some bribes in our new Ring of Mended Meaning, we convinced Davros to pay his taxes in return for our reward. Not exactly glamorous, but most early guild quests aren't. Our next task is to hunt down 4 bandits led by a wood elf called Falangar, who is currently hiding somewhere out in the deserty, plateau-strewn region of Shipple Shin, probably my favorite area in the update. It's labyrinthian and dangerous. In fact, we come across a powerful canyon thrasher very early on into our search, a high-level monster that could dispatch a weaker character rather quickly. Thankfully, Wolf is around level 17, and with a powerful glass blade from a Daedric ruin to boot, we survive by the skin of our teeth. I found the bandits shortly after atop a plateau, as Quarter said they'd be, and utilized this rock to lure the various archers close to me so I could hit them since I didn't have a shield and was running low on healing potions after my fight with the Thrasher. Rather than immediately return to Quarter, I decided to explore the area a bit more and found a hidden Dark Brotherhood sect within the Velothi Haniradun complex. Attacking the leader Jean Duchamp upstairs results in 3 Dark Brotherhood agents spawning in, which, as anyone who has ever played Morrowind knows, one of these is already a handful enough. Though it takes a few reloads and basically all the summoning scrolls and healing potions I have left, I managed to defeat her. Checking the Elder Scrolls unofficial pages, or UESP, while making this video, I learned that not only was she a master assassin, but was the Night Mother of this Dark Brotherhood chapter, meaning we have effectively eliminated her chapter from Morrowind. Oops. I would feel bad about this if not for the fact her corpse contained a glass cuirass and boots, and the room itself was littered with expensive and rare artifacts. She also has this really sick Hierophant robe on that I decided to wear for basically the rest of my run. Feeling I'd pushed my luck enough, I returned a quarter for my reward, and our next mission requires us to go to a plantation east of Narcissus and silence a man known as Roland Vetus, evidently a critic of our local lord, Sir Hilarion. I don't plan on making my way to Narcissus just yet, so we will leave our Fighters Guild progress for now, but don't worry, we will finish them all in the region and a little beyond before our time is up. At this point I decided to explore more of the desert plateau region of Shipple Shin. The desert proper is actually quite well realized and populated with hosts of enemies and dangers in its many crags and canyons. Eventually I stumbled upon this imperial road known as the Purple Road, which connects Narcissus to a fort called Septim's Gate and presumably back towards Cyrodiil proper. Making my way to Septim's Gate, I hopped on the nearby Guar caravan to head over to the town of Shipple Shirai, a caravan way station inside a canyon. Blessedly, this town has an apothecary, so I can finally replenish my sorely lacking supply of potions, as well as a few vendors I can offload some of the various treasures I've picked up along the way on. Inside one of the inns, the Sapphire Slouch Corner Club to be specific, I struck up a conversation with a parched Bosmer waiting for a friend. After giving him some flint I just happened to be carrying because as any Morrowind veteran knows, booze equals combat cheese, Broldor informs me he's waiting on a special sort of shipment and believes his friend may be lost somewhere in the canyons. Once you agree to help, he confesses that the supply he is waiting on is moon sugar, essentially a magical version of cocaine within the Elder Scrolls that Khajiit also use for sacred rituals. It is also highly illegal. Not a big deal, Wolf is an opportunist, not a cop. However, after renting a bed for the night and getting ready to head out, we are stopped by a local guard named Godinia, who suspects Broldor of being up to no good, which I quickly confirm, to which she asks us to retrieve the moon sugar from Broldor's friend, who Godinia assumes must be dead, and to bring it back to her. Works for me. Before heading out though, I decided to explore more of the town and came across this couple who had been hearing strange music coming from a sealed and abandoned apartment above them. The pair, after exhausting their options with local authorities, are contemplating moving out as the sound is driving them insane. Curious, Wolf accepts and uses a spell to unlock the door. We find Sylvan Samalsi, a ghost who is evidently displeased we've interrupted their Shirtar playing. Sylvan reveals that he founded the town and cannot find rest because his descendants have forgotten him, but if we were to retrieve boots that he happened to love during life, then he believes he may be able to find peace. The Samalsi Ancestral Tomb is just outside of town, and its undead guardians are little match for Wolf's skill. I do feel a bit bad about looting the rest of the tomb after finding the boots, but if Samalsi's family can't even bother to honor the founder of the town they currently live in, then why should I care? Sylvam, on the other hand, is grateful and gives us some sapphires, which is presumably how he was able to found the town in the first place. He likewise offers us his apartment before disappearing. Wolf already has a house in Anvil, and I have no intention of living in a canyon in the middle of the desert in Morrowind, so I'm going to leave this one to rot. Downstairs, the couple thanks us for our efforts. Now it's time to find that probably dead friend of Broldor, who admittedly turned out to be much harder to find than I thought she would be, but who was likewise indeed dead, and toting a note all but confessing to their repeated criminal activity. Nearby, I noticed a Daedric ruin, which if you haven't guessed it by now, ended up being one of my main sources of income and XP throughout this run. Only this one was not filled exclusively by Daedra, which I had come to expect, but also by highly skilled Dunmer, which was odd. Indeed, it turned out that this Daedric ruin was actually the camp of a very high-level group of Molig Baal worshippers who are the subject of a quest for the Tribunal Temple. The communal tent house alone housed 5 elite warriors, and genuinely I think was probably the hardest fight in this entire run. Eventually, I devised a strategy to kill one person at a time and then run to one of the other tents, which I had already cleared, and rest to re-heal myself for the next one. I also hit level 19 while doing this, so you can see it took a little while. After enough attempts, I finally cleared the tent, which sported all kinds of high-level loot, such as this unique ebony mace and shield. Laden with goods, I decided to clear out the interior ruins proper, which featured our first fight with a Devourer, a high-level version of a Hunger. The enemies inside proved equally as tough, but their gear, like this Daedric dagger and more pieces of ebony armor, more than made up for it. Leaving the ruins, I must admit, I felt a bit like a boss, as I know this had to be a higher-level challenge of sorts, so I felt good about my decision to bring Wolf back for the task. Back in Shipple Shirai, I gave Godinia the note I found on Broldor's friend's corpse. For our efforts, she arrests Broldor and gives us 300 gold. Not exactly a fortune, but the Daedric ruin on the way more than made up for it. Before leaving town, I decided to stock up on some more potions and sell off what loot I could, knowing I'd likely have to carry the rest of it until we reach Narcissus. For now, it's time to continue exploring. Southwest of Shipple Shirai, there is an Ashlander camp of the Suran. There I discovered that a local Dunmer, Balashu Kells, has gotten into some trouble for their aptitude with necromancy and needs us to defeat a Bone Lord they've summoned nearby. It hasn't attacked anyone in the camp, likely because it's one of their ancestors, but Balashu asks us to get rid of it anyway and to retrieve the ancestral halberd it carries as proof. The Bone Lord is on the ridge directly above the building we found Balashu in, and summons a host of undead to fight us too. Honestly, it was a pretty challenging fight, all things considered. Returning the halberd, which itself is a solid weapon if you happen to use such things, which I don't, Balashu gives us a few books they had been studying on necromancy before their Bone Lord debacle as a reward. To the south of the Suran, there is a fortress overrun by bandits called Caladrion. I mention it only because inside at its peak, the leader wears an enchanted ebony cuirass and wields a glass dai katana, which ended up being one of my main weapons for the remainder of the run. At this point, I feel pretty dripped up. I have a dynamic actors mod on, so my hat can be different in and out of combat, so I have this sort of wandering Ronin thing going on at the moment, which I really like. After repairing my equipment, I notice a familiar sight in the distance, an Iliad ruin, something Wolf would be very familiar with as they're all over the Anvil landscape. The ruin is named Molitor and has been visited recently by an archaeologist who believes the upper ruins house some great secret, though by his notes he isn't quite sure what. After exploring the ruin myself for any signs of this mystery, I come up empty aside from the usual loot and enemies one would find in such a place. But something about the nearby open pit, the starry visage, and the general staircase structure really piqued my interest. Maybe it's because I've played a lot of Souls games, which have their fair share of invisible walkways, doors, and secret passages, but I decided to take the plunge after a quick save and found, to my surprise, a shrine to a Daedric prince. Meridia is the Daedric prince of light and life, and was an important figure in Iliad culture and custom. She also does not feature in base Morrowind, and so, upon clicking her statue, I was surprised and pleased to hear this.
Mortal, heed my words. A great evil festers in the Tower of Odai. The slow Caprice defiles the natural order, crafting vile creations through twisted magic and desecrating the dead. This abomination must be purged. Travel east to Idyll, vanquish Caprice, and cleanse this realm of their corruption.
Now, the individual Meridia is speaking of is a Slode, a rather cruel race of sapient slug folk who also like to make soap, who just so happens to oversee the Janata Syndicate. Yes, we're going to be killing yet another faction leader. As an aside, the Syndicate is a fully fledged faction in this update. It's not like a couple quests. There's 19 quests and an entire rank tree from grub to boss for you to achieve. I think doing this quest will lock you out of that, at least I'm assuming, but I wasn't interested in joining them anyway, so it doesn't matter. Kavatra the Slode resides in the Velothi Tower of Udanu, so that is where we will head next, after placing a recall spell on the ground so I don't have to walk all the way down here again. On the way out of the ruin, we can even find the archaeologist Darium, who I'll admit I was a bit sad to see dead because he seemed nice by his notes. Molitor is near to an imperial outpost called Stormgate Pass, so I stay there for the night before heading back into the desert in search of Udanu, which is essentially due south of Narcissus. On the way, we stop at Yondarin, an Ashlander fortress of the Nassar clan. There I use some of my excess gold to train up my heavy armor skill, since I was so laden with heavy armor anyway. Now, heavy armor wasn't even one of my minor skills, but because of all the loot I'd found, specifically ebony pieces, I managed to raise it all the way from I think level 15, maybe 10, to level 50. I figured based on how we fared so far that I'd likely find more heavy armor than not inside Udanu and other places, so why not take advantage of it if I could? Now, Udanu itself is a veritable fortress, as it would be considering it's the headquarters of a bona fide crime faction. If you want to get inside without killing the orcs outside for the key, you'll have to either have an investment in lockpicking, alteration like I do, or a lock splitter scroll, which I also have, but I don't use unless it's for a high level dungeon. I won't go through the ins and outs of the dungeon itself and all its loot specifically, because frankly there's a ton, but just know I felt like a kid on Christmas clearing out its halls. As for Kavatra himself, he was surprisingly non-hostile when I approached, despite the fact that I had just killed the rest of his guards on the way up here. Slodes can be a tough fight at lower levels, but I apparently got really lucky and my Atronach's birth sign seemed to negate a lot of his damage, so he went down without too much trouble. Upstairs you'll find even more loot and various keys, one of which opens the door to a cell in the basement near the vaults that holds a Dunmer of Yondarin. It seems we've inadvertently rescued him on our way to pillage the vaults. Well done us! As for the vault itself, it's a very treasure of the Sierra Madre moment. There's almost no way you'll be able to carry everything, but I must have spent at least 10 minutes figuring out what I wanted most before I left. The hardest part of this dungeon was honestly leaving, as I had to deal with the heavy armored orc guards outside since I meant to go to Yondarin for my reward before returning to Meridia. For our effort, the chiefess of the Yondarin gives us the Nassar Flame Defender, a chitin cuirass with a constant 10% fire resistance effect. Not super useful for me, but it's still cool. Meridia, on the other hand, thanks us for our efforts and rewards us with a bona fide Daedric artifact, the Helm of Light Within, a heavy armor helmet that provides its own light source, which I found incredibly useful in Morrowind's many dark caves and dungeons. And so, with such a grandiose achievement out of the way, I think it's time we finally made our way to the city of Narcissus. I spotted Narcissus first on the horizon coming north from the direction of Udanu. I will warn viewers now that some sections of this video may seem choppier than those before. Morrowind is an old game, and despite the impressive amount of optimization through projects like OpenMW and even just within Tamriel rebuilt itself, it would be foolish to assume you will have perfect performance in areas as dense with content as this. For what it's worth, I do not have the best PC, so your miles may vary. Anyway, Narcissus itself is a truly massive and beautiful city broken up into 6 districts. We enter south via the Foreign Quarter, where we will be stopping from time to time, as it houses the Fighters Guild and several of the city's shops that don't belong to native Dunmer, those obviously being in the Market Quarter. But we aren't here to shop, we're here for the arena, which is located in the council quarter. Since I arrived at dusk and decided to wander the foreign quarter for a bit, I didn't actually end up at the arena until nightfall. The arena's questline begins when you join the faction as an Iron Scale via the pit boss Felms. The rank is not only a metaphor of your worth within the arena, but represented by a physical scale within your inventory of varying value from iron to ebony. After joining the arena and agreeing to our first fight against a farmhand, we also have the opportunity of placing a bet on ourselves around the corner in the main lobby at the desk. You can likewise talk to one of the various NPCs or the arena contestants about each opponent if you wish. Note that each fight, unless specified, is just until someone gets hurt enough for the fight to be called by the announcer, and killing someone will generally lead to your expulsion. Truth be told, while the focus of my personal run was completing the arena questline, I fear I won't be going into too much detail on its contents here in this video. This is partially because there's a much longer chain of events which I have to do in order to finish the questline anyway, and honestly most fights do boil down to go inside, defeat enemy, repeat, so it's not exactly exciting. There's a couple twists along the way, but really I feel fairly confident in saying that if you've ever completed an arena questline in an Elder Scrolls game, you know what to expect here. Anyway, after I got the silver and gold scales and defeated a Telvanni spy in the arena, I have earned my chance to compete for the ebony scale, the highest rank in the Narcissus arena. There's just one problem. The current holder of the ebony scale, Seller Adrin, is not in the arena for me to challenge. He's a bodyguard for Duke Fethis Halalu, who lives in the nearby fortress of Riverkeep. Now, I don't know why Fethis was naked for me. I think it may be because I had some issue with my Tamriel data for about 3/4 of my run because I had installed it incorrectly, so he may very well have a different appearance, I don't know. Anyway, after using our deep gold reserves on Seller, he tells us that he will only agree to fight if Fethis permits it. Fethis tells us he's not willing to risk the reputation of his famed bodyguard on our behalf, and will only allow us to fight him if we 1. Have a Morrowind reputation of 30, are 2. A councilman or higher in House Halalu, or 3. Have been acknowledged as the Nerevarine by Vivek. He doesn't say those specifically, but that's the requirements. You can also taunt Seller until he accepts, but that felt like the boring way out. Therefore, it seems that Wolf is at a bit of an impasse. Checking my own reputation, I can see it's currently at 13, meaning we are less than halfway or 17 to go before we can face off against Seller and complete this run. Ouch. At this point, I took to the UESP, which I highly recommend if you're confused during your runs, as it has a detail of most of the quests, and looked for ways that I could reasonably achieve this, mostly within the confines of the new areas. And since we have to do the Fighters Guild quests anyway, it seemed like a good time to pay Roland Vetis a visit, since he was our next mission for the Halarenhol Fighters Guild anyway. I found him at his plantation east of Narcissus, as Quarter said, and decided to just kill him. To be honest, I was a bit frustrated at having to get 30 reputation, so this was probably a little too personal. Even Quarter was a bit surprised at our method, but applauded our go-to spirit, or so I'm going to call it, and next assigns us a hit on an Ordinator outside Othmura sent by the temple to reassert the faith's dominance in Halarenhol. You can get to the town quickly enough via boat, and since we already know someone there, the fisherman's wife Soldreni tells us where we can find this Ordinator, who we kill without too much difficulty. Quarter rewards us with 1,000 gold for our effort, and we gain the Fighters Guild rank of Journeyman, or rank 2 in the process. At this point, we've run out of contracts with Quarter for now, as we're still too new to the guild to be given anything more substantial. He recommends we return to Narcissus or head to Almasthir, and I'm sure you can guess where I plan to go. In Narcissus, we meet with the Nord Losker, who gives us the simple enough task of clearing out some Shirai hoppers, basically giant grasshoppers from a nearby house. Essentially just clearing rats from a house, but with a different face. Easy enough. Next, we are to fetch some silver ore for the guild smith. Again, nothing too crazy, as I happen to already be carrying some around with me for my explorations. After this, we are tasked with protecting a caravan believed to be the target of the Janata Syndicate. For my own sake, I pretended I hadn't just completely gutted their upper leadership by assuming they have maybe contingent groups scattered throughout the area working semi-independently. I don't know. Much like their bosses, the bandits stood little chance against Wolf. Lasker's last contract is a bounty put forward by the Imperial Legion on someone named Neolimus, who is located somewhere around Shipple Shirai. Since we know people there too, it isn't hard for us to locate the den of Nisset Mine. Even if the bandits themselves aren't very impressive, I do have to hand it to them. They have a nice little stash of loot in here. We also find a journal detailing that a Shipple Shirai local has been letting the gang steal from a local warehouse. Not cool. We report both their elimination and the locals' betrayal to the Imperial Guard Madala, who gives us a little extra gold for our trouble. Lasker likewise rewards us with 500 gold. Our next contract giver is a Dunmer named Terras Vendenius, who tells us that the Vetis plantation is having trouble with a hive of skyrenders nearby. These are essentially giant bees. We are tasked with killing their queen. I recommend bringing a few levitation scrolls or potions, as there's no way of actually getting into or maneuvering around the hive without them. This is the first part of the video where I also have to report that because of how I recorded this, I did not manage to get any footage of me actually killing the queen or even turning the quest in because I guess I wasn't recording. She wasn't threatening, to be fair, but it's annoying that I only noticed this while writing the script. Oh well. Next, we are to calm a rebellion happening at the Imperial Num Itu Sapphire Mine near Stormgate Pass, which I do easily enough with some persuasion, i.e. thousands of golden bags handed from me to their leader until she agreed to stop the strike. After that, we're given one of the more interesting contracts of the bunch, at least I think, one which doesn't require we even leave Narcissus. The 6th Halalu house has requested we find their ancestral copy of On Falsity from a supposed shrine deep in the city's catacombs. A local Fighters Guild Khajiit named Drozajir has also explored the catacombs before and gives us some instructions on how they think we can find the inner chamber where the shrine probably is. Interestingly, we actually have to break into the catacombs themselves first, or at least I did, which are filled with various undead, much like you'd find in a normal Dunmer burial chamber or tomb. This changes, however, as you approach the shrine itself, which is guarded by not one, but 3 devourers, the book being on the back of the shrine to what appears to be Molig Bal, although the book itself seems to pertain to Boethia. I don't remember where I did it, and again, I may not have been recording, but I noticed after turning this quest in that I was the rank of swordsman, or rank 3 within the guild. Much like Yasker, Terrace only has one more task for us, and it's a doozy. The local arena wants us to capture a canyon thrasher, the deadliest enemy native to this region. We've faced one before, if you recall, and they are formidable to be sure. We are to meet with a representative of the arena who recognizes us because of our gold scale rank and gives us a leash to capture the thrasher after we've weakened it enough to do so. The game will tell you when to do this automatically, but if it doesn't, just reload, which you may have to do anyway because even at my level, which I think at this point was 21, the thrasher still managed to kill me a couple times before I could take it down, and even then it was only by a sliver of health. They're very strong. With the leash attached to the thrasher, it will follow you outside, whereupon the arena representative will handle its transport back to the city. Our reward is 1,000 gold and an enchanted glass mace called the Sting of Debilitation. I'm starting to think I should have gone blunt with how many maces I've found. We also achieve the rank of Protector or rank 4 upon completing Terrace's quest chain. The final Narcissus Fighters Guild quest giver is Master of the Narcissus Fighters Guild herself, Makaria, a high elf who trained in the traditional Akaviri Sifim ways. Unfortunately, we can't get any contracts from her until we reach the rank of Warder or rank 6, so it seems we must head back to Quarter, who, now that we've grown in rank, tasks us with attacking a trade ship belonging to Sir Hilarin's rivals. As per Quarter's words, he provides ample money and training for the guild in exchange for us to basically be his thugs. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I assume it'll come to a head later, so let's just do some crime and not worry about it. The ship and its crew are just off the shore of Hilarin Hull and are beyond weaklings because they're just civilians. I noticed on the way back that there's a drow nest nearby, which, as I know from my epic encounter with them in Project Cyrodiil, is bound to be full of all sorts of goods provided one can breathe underwater with the right spells or racial aptitude. Returning to Quarter after my exploration, it seems the attack on the ship has been blamed on nearby House Redoran forces for being unable to defend the river against brigands, and our next contract relates to this directly. We are to eliminate a Redoran patrol who has apparently overstepped into Sir Hilarin's territory. The patrol can be found just outside of Waters March, a Redoran keep that watches over the waters. Who would have thought? I always feel bad killing Redoran forces as they've long been my favorite of the great houses, but I'm not getting paid to have sympathy. So with the 3 dead, I repair my equipment, which at this point is almost entirely glass and ebony armor pieces by the way, and walk to a nearby Netch farm where the local says something is stirring the spider daedra in the shrine to Boethia above her farm. We should investigate. Spider daedra are not nearly as attractive in Morrowind as they are in Oblivion, but they do love to blind you. The grounds are littered with them and various other daedra. Something is indeed going on inside, where we find hostile cultists and other spider daedra. The further in we venture, the more abundant the NPC cultists, who are eventually also smuggling skooma. I feel something must be at the bottom, and there is. Aside from Daedric's sword-wielding daedra, there are glass and other high-level equipment littered around the inner sanctums, and at the base of the ruins, players can find a spider daedra queen, who I hesitate to show here for the sake of spoilers, because I want you to see her for yourself, but she is really neat, and she does pose quite a fun challenge. With the threat eliminated, I stop by Waters March, or Aldmeric, as it's apparently called for a good night's rest. This is partially because I know there's a quest here where I can raise my reputation by 1 called Free to Work, which you can get from the Argonian Shines Like Stone in the Keep. I won't at length detail all of these reputation quests, I'll probably just summarize them because most of them aren't terribly interesting. For this one, you're just freeing his friend from slavery, basically. And with their friend freed, it's time to go back to Quarter. Quarter gives me a surprising amount of gold for eliminating the patrol, 3,000, which I feel is a lot considering they weren't terribly strong, but what do I know? Since we've now exhausted Quarter's contracts, we need to find a way to both increase our rank and to get more reputation points, and I think I know the perfect plan. Firewatch is one of the oldest parts of Project Tamriel, having originally been implemented in 2006, though it's been updated and reworked since. And lucky for me, a significant amount of Fighters Guild quests that will, hopefully, allow us to reach the rank of Warder. Looks like we're headed north. Firewatch is an important Imperial port firmly in Telvanni land, and while the Telvanni themselves are much less metropolitan than their Hlaalu counterparts, we won't notice much of a difference since this town is solely controlled by the Empire. While looking for the Fighters Guild, I found a woman named Gorinia who has a clan fear trapped in her house. That's odd. After eliminating the creature, we discovered that the Daedra was summoned to impress her by a sorcerer named Renar, who has apparently locked himself in her room. A bold strategy, and one that does him no favors as I threaten him with the guards after he refuses to leave. Gorinia thanks us for her troubles, and we walk into the Fighters Guild next door to begin this series of quests, of which there are 8, with half giving +1 reputation each depending on how you complete them, which would bring our total to 21. The first two quests pertain to assisting a local merchant who has been cheated by his business partners, and the second aiding the local Argonian apothecary Misteyes, who was apparently a contract killer in his past life. A fellow Argonian, Salaraz from the court of Bravel, has come to eliminate him in the name of justice. I can understand that personally, however he's currently my client, so I can't let you do that. Thankfully, if you're over level 15, Salaraz will realize he has no chance of fighting you and will agree to leave Misteyes in peace. With both quests complete, we achieve the rank of Defender, or rank 5. The third contract is more interesting than the last two and pertains to a member of the Fighters Guild gone missing, an orc named Meshugro Dugal. He was sent to kill a necromancer at the Velothi Tower of Nasudan. Very likely he is dead, or so Permil, our quest giver, believes. However, inside you will find that Meshug is actually alive and well, only he's stuck in a trap that has magically sealed the door. It's a simple platform puzzle where one person has to stand on the raised platform away from the door so the barrier will drop. I instruct him to walk out as I stand on it and then summon a scamp to stand on the platform for me so that I can escape too. Meshug thanks us and we leave together. You have to do this, by the way, if you want the reputation point. He cannot stay there. Our next quest involves guarding a shop in the cold-strewn imperial port of Nivalis to the north, which I quite like the look of, and eliminating the burglar. It's nothing crazy, but I did take the opportunity to then talk to people around town and learned of an orc pirate being held in Icebreaker Keep, the local seat of authority. The orc Lishgro Garok is apparently not a pirate at all, and is actually just an adventurer like us, who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and was captured by an imperial vessel for piracy. He asks you to retrieve his axe from the ship that captured him called Ghost Runner, and also to give him a scroll of Almsylvi intervention so he can escape out of Imperial-controlled territory. I have a soft spot for orcs, so I agree. To get the axe, I actually just convinced another orc guard on the ship that Lish is not a pirate, and I return with it and the scroll that I already had, earning 1 reputation and freeing an innocent orc from shackles. Justice is done. Another local told me of constant strange noises coming from the nearby Daedric ruin of Yamandakal, so naturally I had to check that out too. This, much like the Spider Daedra dungeon, is a massive Daedric dungeon with devourers and cultists abound. At its base we find a Zavali, a powerful and highly intelligent member of the Daedra who often serve Molag Bal, and likewise serves as this dungeon's boss. They are quite strong and wield an enchanted two-handed Daedric battle axe. At this point in the run, I've become so laden with goods that I've begun dropping bits and pieces of them off throughout Morrowind, some here in Firewatch at the Fighters Guild, some back at the arena in Narcissus, and so on. I'll retrieve the best of it before we leave so we can display it at our home in Anvil. The next quest is unfortunately not nearly as interesting, as it merely pertains to getting a stalker to leave a local resident alone. There's a few ways to deal with him, but I usually just trick him into going to Nivalis and getting him locked on an Imperial vessel because I think it's funny. While restocking potions at the Firewatch Mages Guild, I notice a very tall Daedra called a Guardian wielding a Daedric Claymore in the corner. A powerful weapon we could absolutely take advantage of if I can get it off of him. While the mages surely won't appreciate it, I'm not a mage so I don't care. I decide to taunt the creature until it attacks me, allowing me to kill it and take the Claymore for myself. With the removal of the Stalker, we have exhausted Permil's quests and now need to speak to the local chapter master, an Imperial named Brant, who finally gives us something we are good at, a bounty for a bandit mercenary hiding in a stronghold to the south. This should be fun. Now, normally this would have been a fairly straightforward progression in the video. I'd explain how I went to the bandit camp, I killed them, and then I returned. However, on the way down to the fort for the bounty, I found a shipwreck which prompted a quest of sorts on its own. This is the Forlorn shipwreck, which would seem to be unassuming if not for the fact it contains the gauntlets of Savior's Hide, pieces of equipment added by Tamriel rebuilt to give the Daedric armor of Hircine, Lord of the Hunt, a complete set. Naturally, since I use light armor and am a Nord besides, I think it's only right that I find the rest of these pieces. Thankfully, we don't have to look too far for the next one, as the pauldrons of Savior's Hide can be found on the bandit leader Gamra, so we've been sent to eliminate anyway. The next pieces can be found just a bit further south in a bandit cave near Helnim called Barantis, where the local bandit leader sports the greaves of Savior's Hide. Now, I'm sure any Morrowind veteran worth their salt is just yelling at me right now to where the cuirass is, I know, but our next piece is actually the boots, which you can purchase in Helnim from the Khajiit Parachio for 20,000 gold. Though I have more than enough to purchase it outright, I use this opportunity to offload many heavy and unnecessary equipment and buy the boots for just a couple thousand gold. Next, we travel to Tel Fir, the home of Divithfir, where again veteran players know the Savior's Hide can be found in a 100 difficulty master lock near his chambers. With the rest of the armor assembled, we only need the helmet, which proves to be the most difficult to acquire, or at the very least the most painful, because I have to use my last lock splitter scroll to get it. In Firewatch's Ember Keep, there is a vault which contains numerous expensive and high-level equipment, one of which is the Helm of Savior's Hide. Now, this wouldn't be a difficult grab for a Master Thief, but Wolf is not that, and this took me far longer than I care to admit to acquire. Eventually, I simply taunted the Khajiit guard inside the vault to attack me so I could grab it in peace. With the helmet, we now have a 100% spell-resistant armor set that is also about double the potency protection-wise of glass, although to be honest, it does look really stupid. The last two missions for the Firewatch Fighters Guild are actually not necessarily worth relaying. The first requires us to clear out the lower halls of a recently discovered Dwemer ruin of Dwemer constructs, and the second to secure contracts for the Fighters Guild throughout the city of Firewatch. Not really interesting, kind of ends with a whimper really. But with both contracts finished, we are now officially a warder or rank 6 in the guild and can return to Narsis to complete the Fighters Guild quest there. Since this video is already running kind of long, way longer than I had anticipated when I sat down to write this, let's just summarize the next few reputation quests. Our first involved helping a former sailor cure his skooma problem in Firewatch at the behest of his friend by helping him find a new hobby to occupy himself. The second saw us assisting a Breton knight in Halarenholt convince the wife of a local shopkeeper, his lover, to run away with him to High Rock. This one was actually really good. The third involved rescuing a local Dunmer in Halarenholt from a cult in a nearby Daedric ruin, and the fourth saw us in Shipple Shirai helping the owner of the House of Red Wings acquire more Cyrodiilic brandy and remove a local sect of bandits in one swoop, bringing our total reputation to 25. Now, in an effort to not drive myself totally insane, and because we had to go to Narsis for the last 5 reputation quests anyway, I decided to complete the Fighters Guild questline in the Narsis region first. Mikaraya's first task for us is to slay the legendary Akaviri general Koranu Najan, starting off strong here. Evidently, his student Duranius Vess founded the original Sifim, which turned into the modern Fighters Guild, which I mentioned earlier. Despite the fact that he would be several thousand years old, Koranu Najan is evidently still alive, and his undead forces are posing a threat to the region from the ruined Imperial fort of Casimir. If you speak with Valgus Arquidius, an Imperial of the Guild, for more information on the general, you can learn that he is a Seishi, an immortal serpent species from Akavir, who, long ago, ruled Tamriel under the Akaviri potentate before being overthrown by the Cyrodiilic peoples and eventually serving under the legendary Emperor Remen. Casimir is actually not far outside of Shipple Shirai for those curious, and I had actually gone there way earlier in this run before realizing there was probably something quite important at the bottom, and I left before finishing it. Unlike the Daedra Spider and Skyrender Queens, which did not feature in this video for various reasons, this was a creature I knew I had to include as it is the only Seishi featured in Tamriel Rebuilt so far. The general can be found in the lowest recesses of the fort, which will normally have many second-era undead Imperial guards, but again, I've already defeated them, so I simply walked to the bottom to meet him. Koranu Najan is tall and imposing, a snake being indeed. I actually really loved his model and was disappointed that despite the numerous dialogue options you can have with him, detailing his various experiences and lore about second-era Cyrodiil, you have to fight him. Disappointingly, I didn't find the task too difficult, which could just be because Wolf is around level 23, but I was pleased to see he dropped a unique Akaviri Dai Katana, essentially just an enchanted ebony Dai Katana, but it was really cool. I take a moment to say a quiet prayer for a worthy foe before returning to Mikaraya, who doesn't actually give you any sort of reward for the task of killing who was essentially the immortal teacher of the founder of your faction, which is weird, but whatever. Her next task isn't nearly as interesting, so again, I'll just summarize. She wants us to find a spy at the Imperial Consulate who proved to be more annoying than anything, as the Halalu main hall where the spy is enormous and houses dozens of rooms you have to root through before you can find them. You do get 3,000 gold for it, and the Imperial Consulate Genesian does point to potential Halalu influence within our guild. We already know that, but there's a bigger quest involving that coming up. The next mission is part of Mikaraya's plan to assert better dominance over the guild by forcing the guild steward of the Kragenmort chapter to agree to work with the Narsis one by rescuing a fellow guild member from a necromancer before they do. Again, fairly straightforward, so we won't go into too much detail about it, although I will say the actual necromancer himself was pretty formidable. I think he summoned like 6 skeletal minions and a bone lord to help him, which is ridiculous. Mikaraya's final mission is actually a cool one as it pertains to the very apparent Halalu influence on the Narsis Fighters Guild. She wants us to find a way to get both quarter of the Halarenholt Guild to stop working for Sir Halaran and to speak to the leader of the Andrethus Guild, who we've up to now never come to contact with, as they seem to be wishing to split their own guild in half back into a Halalu faction known as the Israg Tong. Since the Andrethus leader Davos is in Narsis anyway, I'm going to talk to him first, although he doesn't actually have much to say and attacks us immediately upon asking about Halalu influence. I guess that ends their ambitions. As for Quarter, he's much easier to deal with, as any shady businessman he could be reasoned with money. He asks us for 2,500 gold. This could be double depending on how you've dealt with previous interactions and quests for him, but since we followed his orders more or less to the letter, we get off pretty easy. After giving him the gold, he agrees to stop working directly for Sir Halaran and work only for Mikaraya once again. With both individuals dealt with, Mikaraya thanks us, although she, again, does not give us any sort of reward. This person is quite stingy. This is her last order, but if you ask her for more, she will hint that there's an obvious criminal influence within the Vardenfell Fighters Guild, and to seek out Perseus Mercius, a true GOAT and one of the only not shady members of the Fighters Guild in the base game. While we won't be doing that, I did think it was cool this was included. A lot of quests in Tamriel Rebuilt try to tie back to the base game. For our services, we rank up one final time to Guardian or rank 7. After completing the Fighters Guild, our total reputation is now 27, meaning we only need 3 more to complete our objective of finishing the arena. So let's get them, shall we? Those last 3 quests involve solving the murder of a sailor we found dead in an alley, settling a gambling debt for a Mages Guild apprentice, and finding the missing son of a local apothecary who decided he wanted to become an adventurer and inadvertently almost got himself sacrificed by a cult. Oops. I do want to take a moment now to simply highlight the fact that my only goal for this run was to complete the arena. That was it, and yet we have gone so far off track of that. On a quest spanning dozens of hours to various locations old and new, and seeing sights never before seen in base Morrowind, truly I think this adventure highlights not only the spirit of Morrowind, but of this massive mod in general. It really is the best Elder Scrolls mod I've ever seen, and if you're still watching at this point, I'm sure you can understand why. This video is not an anomaly. It is but a small example of an entire massive world out there for you to explore within the confines of an over 20-year-old game because of dedicated fans. It's truly incredible. With our 30 reputation finally achieved, we can return to Duke Fethis Halalu, who, despite the fact that I've definitely updated my Tamriel data now, is still naked. But he agrees to let us challenge Seller Adrin, so who cares? I wish I could say this final climactic battle was as epic as the journey it took to get to it, but such things are rarely true. Wolf is basically a living god at this point, and Seller quite literally never even lands a hit before going down. Interestingly, if you speak to him after defeating him while still inside the arena, he will go ballistic and attack you, which prompted me to kill him. I do wish I would have waited to do this outside, because then I could have maybe looted his cool Aldmeri glass armor, but so it goes. While the pit boss Felms, who's become our friend over this journey, is disappointed we had to kill Seller, he's not angry with us and rewards us with the Ebony Scale, as well as Seller's Daikatana for our efforts. It's the exact same damage-wise as the Akaviri one we just used to kill him, but who doesn't love more cool swords? Thus, we've reached the end of this video. Though, as I hopefully stressed, this is by no means a comprehensive look at even a fraction of what you can do within this mod. This is just a few quest lines, really. Almost every major faction in Great House has additional content to cover, and to cover all of them at length would require a literal several hour-long video series, of which I think no one would want. As for Wolf himself, his time in Morrowind has come to a close, and we are heading back to Anvil laden, as I said so long ago now, in an absolute hoard of treasures. Treasures which I take the opportunity to decorate my home of Goldenrod with as a ceremonial conclusion to our journey. Still, something tells me this won't be the last we see of Wolf, as part of me wants to see how he'd handle the Tomb of the Snow Prince mod, which sees a Tamriel Rebuilt style overhaul from Morrowind's Blood Moon DLC, something I've never finished. But for now, let's applaud the modders who make such adventures possible, and Wolf, who now, at his home in Anvil, can finally have some much needed rest.